I'm Mackenzie Mitchell, 28, standing on the porch of my very own home with keys in hand and tears in my eyes. Working since 16, putting myself through college and saving every possible penny led me here. While my parents never contributed a dime to my education or future, I somehow managed to beat the odds. This mix of pride and lingering hurt is something many of us know too well, that bittersweet feeling when you've had to become your own safety net. Before I share how independence became both my burden and blessing, let me know where you're watching from and hit subscribe if you believe in building your own path despite the obstacles. I grew up in a modest split-level house in suburban Pennsylvania, where money troubles lurked beneath the surface of our seemingly middle-class life. My parents, Karen and Brian Mitchell, struggled financially but treated the topic of money like a shameful secret. Our home operated on a strange contradiction. We never discussed finances openly, yet the tension of unpaid bills constantly hung in the air like an invisible storm cloud. As the oldest of 3 children, I sensed this financial strain before my siblings Jason and Amber did. Maybe that's why I started my first neighborhood lemonade stand at 10 years old. While other kids spent weekends at the community pool, I diluted store-brand lemonade powder and sold it for 25 cents a cup, hiding my earnings in an old sock pushed to the back of my dresser drawer. When I was 12, my father temporarily lost his job at the manufacturing plant. For 6 weeks, I watched my parents whisper harshly behind closed doors, their faces tense at the dinner table. The house became filled with unspoken worries. No one explained what was happening, but I noticed the thermostat set lower and generic brands replacing our usual groceries. That Christmas, while my younger siblings received the latest video game system to share, I got a practical set of clothes with the sizes still tagged for easy returns. Middle school became my first taste of true achievement. I threw myself into academics, earning straight A's despite my parents rarely attending school functions. My science fair project on water conservation won first place at the regional competition. The local newspaper ran a small feature, and while neighbors called to congratulate my parents, neither mom nor dad attended the awards ceremony. My biology teacher, Mrs. Henderson, sat in the parent section instead, clapping loudly when they called my name. As I progressed through school, my mother Karen seemed increasingly threatened by my growing self-reliance. When I'd solve household problems or help my siblings with homework, she'd make cutting remarks like, "Well, aren't you just perfect?" or "Sorry we can't all be as smart as Mackenzie." Each accomplishment of mine seemed to highlight what she perceived as her own failures. My father Brian existed in emotional absence. He worked long hours and spent evenings in his garage workshop, emerging only for meals where he'd ask routine questions about school before retreating back to his projects. The few times I brought report cards to him, he'd nod and say, "Good job," without making eye contact, as though my achievements were expected rather than celebrated. By 14, anxiety about financial security had become my constant companion. I started babysitting for neighborhood families, charging less than other sitters to ensure steady work. On weekends, I helped elderly neighbors with chores, weeding gardens, organizing medicine cabinets, and walking dogs. Every dollar earned went into my sock, which eventually became too full to hide. My sophomore English teacher, Mr. Dalton, noticed me counting cash during lunch one day. Instead of reprimanding me, he sat down and asked what I was saving for. When I explained I needed money for the future, his expression softened with concern. The next day, he brought me pamphlets about youth savings accounts and offered to drive me to the local credit union after school. At 15, I opened my first bank account with $347, money that represented countless lawns mowed and children watched. The guidance counselor's office became my sanctuary during junior year. While other students visited to discuss college applications, I came with spreadsheets and calculations. Ms. Winters, one of the few adults who took my situation seriously, helped me understand that my parents' financial situation meant college would be entirely my responsibility. Rather than discouraging me, this knowledge hardened my resolve. If I wanted higher education, I would need to fund it myself. That year, I overheard my parents discussing my brother's upcoming baseball camp, a $500 expense they somehow found money for while simultaneously telling me they couldn't contribute to my SAT prep course. That night, I made a promise to myself I would never expect or ask for financial help from them again. Their resources clearly had destinations that didn't include my future, and acknowledging this painful truth was oddly freeing. The summer I turned 16, I applied to every business within biking distance of our house. Wilson's Market, a family-owned grocery store, hired me as a cashier for minimum wage. My first day, I arrived 30 minutes early, my polo shirt freshly ironed and my hair pulled back in a neat ponytail. The store manager, Linda Wilson, seemed amused by my earnestness, but quickly recognized my work ethic. Most teenagers I hire are counting the minutes until they can leave, she told me during my second week. You're the first one who's asked for extra hours. Linda became more than a boss, she was the first adult who valued my determination. When she promoted me to shift supervisor 6 months later, she increased my hourly rate by $1 and adjusted my schedule to accommodate my academic priorities. On slow afternoons, she taught me about inventory management and profit margins, practical business knowledge that no school class offered. Balancing academics with 20-hour work weeks required military-like discipline. My days began at 5:30 a.m. with homework completion before school and ended with evening shifts until 9 p.m. Weekends meant full 8-hour workdays, leaving Sunday evenings for laundry and preparation for the coming week. Despite this grueling schedule, I maintained a 3.9 GPA, often completing assignments during lunch periods or slow moments at the checkout counter. This schedule came with sacrifices. I missed the homecoming dance my junior year because I couldn't afford to lose a Saturday shift. When classmates planned beach trips for spring break, I stayed behind to pick up extra hours. My social circle narrowed to those who understood, or at least accepted, my constraints. My friend Allison grew increasingly frustrated with my unavailability. You're choosing to work all the time, she complained after I missed her birthday party. Your parents aren't even poor. You're just obsessed with money. Her words stung because they revealed how little she understood my reality, that preparing for my future wasn't a choice, but a necessity. Tyler, another classmate who worked part-time at a local hardware store, became one of my few close friends. He understood the pride in earning your own money and the stress of adult responsibilities. We'd sometimes meet for coffee before school, comparing paychecks and savings goals in hushed tones while other students discussed parties and dating drama. After 3 months at Wilson's Market, I made my first significant purchase, a refurbished laptop for $400. My parents questioned why I'd waste money on a computer when I could use the family desktop. They didn't understand that the shared computer in our living room made completing assignments nearly impossible, with my siblings constantly needing it for games and my late-night work schedule conflicting with my father's online browsing. My budgeting system evolved into something almost obsessive. Each paycheck was immediately divided. 50% to savings, 30% to upcoming college expenses, and 20% for current needs like clothes and school supplies. I tracked every penny in a small notebook, reviewing my spending weekly for any possible cuts. When friends spent $5 on coffee shop drinks, I brought a thermos from home. While classmates upgraded to the latest phones, I kept my basic model until it literally stopped functioning. My parents viewed this financial discipline with a mixture of confusion and dismissiveness. You only live once, Mackenzie, my mother would say when I declined family takeout orders to save money. All this pinching pennies for what? To miss out on being young. What she perceived as deprivation, I saw as investment in a future where I wouldn't have to depend on anyone's unreliable help. Junior year brought the reality of college financing into sharp focus. My guidance counselor, Mr. Peterson, seemed startled by my detailed knowledge of student loan interest rates and scholarship requirements. When he suggested discussing financial options with my parents, I firmly explained they wouldn't be contributing. That's unusual for a family in your demographic, he noted carefully. Have you considered community college first? Rather than discouraging me, his doubt fueled my determination. I spent afternoons in the school library researching every possible scholarship, grant, and work-study program. I created spreadsheets comparing tuition costs at different institutions, calculating potential debt loads against projected starting salaries in various fields. By 17, I had a more sophisticated understanding of education financing than most adults. My senior year English teacher nominated me for a statewide essay competition with a $2,000 scholarship prize. I spent weeks perfecting my submission, a personal narrative about finding self-reliance through financial independence. When the award letter arrived, I showed it to my parents with cautious hope for their approval. "That's nice," my father said, barely looking up from his newspaper. "But $2,000 won't get you far with today's tuition costs." That evening, I added the scholarship to my growing college fund and adjusted my budget projections. My parents' approval had become irrelevant currency. I was learning to validate my own accomplishments. The acceptance letter from State University arrived with both exhilaration and dread. While the partial academic scholarship covered about 40% of my tuition, the remaining costs loomed like a mountain I'd have to climb with my bare hands. I'd saved nearly $12,000 from my high school jobs, an impressive sum for a teenager, but barely enough for 1 year's expenses. 2 weeks before high school graduation, my parents called a family meeting, something so rare it immediately set off alarm bells. Sitting at our kitchen table, they awkwardly explained they had no money set aside for my education. "We always assumed you'd get scholarships with your grades," my mother said, not meeting my eyes. "And there are loans, of course." The conversation might have been less painful if not for what happened the following day. Returning home early from work, I overheard my mother on the phone discussing my sister Amber's private dance lessons. A $230 monthly expense they had apparently been managing for the past year. The discovery felt like a physical blow. Their financial limitations were selective, applying to my future but not my sister's extracurricular activities. I moved into a tiny off-campus apartment that August, sharing the cramped 2-bedroom unit with Ashley, a sophomore biology major I'd met through a university housing forum. Our living room contained salvaged furniture, the kitchen was barely functional, and we shared a bathroom smaller than most closets. But the rent was $300 less per month than the dorms, and living off-campus meant I could cook instead of purchasing the mandatory meal plan. Within my first week, I secured 2 jobs, morning shifts at the campus library and weekend serving at Crestview Restaurant, a busy family dining spot near campus. Between these positions, I worked 30 to 35 hours weekly while carrying a full course load. My days typically began at 6 a.m. and ended after midnight, with studying crammed into every available moment during lunch breaks, between classes, and on the city bus during my commute. The academic challenges mounted quickly. During midterms of my first semester, I nodded off during a morning lecture, earning a concerned email from Professor James, my American literature instructor. Instead of dismissing me as lazy, he invited me to his office hours. "Your written work shows remarkable insight," he said, "but your participation is suffering." "What's going on?" When I explained my work schedule, his expression shifted from concern to something resembling respect mixed with dismay. Rather than suggesting I work less, advice I couldn't afford to take, he offered practical accommodations. Flexible deadlines when my work schedule intensified and permission to occasionally submit discussion responses in writing when I couldn't attend class. My social life became almost non-existent. While dorm residents formed tight-knit friendships through late-night conversations and weekend activities, I barely knew my classmates' names. The college experience that movies and television had promised, football games, spontaneous road trips, late-night study groups, existed in a parallel universe I could glimpse, but never enter. During spring semester, I met Michael in my macroeconomics class. He was smart, engaged in classroom discussions, and seemingly unbothered by my limited availability. For 2 months, we managed a semblance of dating, studying together between my shifts, him bringing coffee to the library during my breaks. But the relationship crumbled when he grew increasingly frustrated with my work constraints. "You're choosing this," he said during our final argument. Your parents would help if you'd just ask them. You're too proud. His words revealed a fundamental misunderstanding of my reality. What looked like pride to him was survival to me. We broke up the following week, adding heartbreak to my growing list of sacrifices. My carefully constructed financial plan faced its first major crisis when my used car, a necessity for reaching my off-campus restaurant job, broke down completely. The $1,800 repair bill decimated my emergency fund. For 2 weeks, I walked 3 miles to campus each morning in pre-dawn darkness, feeling as though I'd failed despite doing everything right. To rebuild my savings, I added tutoring to my workload, offering writing help to underclassmen for $15 per hour. The extra income helped, but the additional time commitment meant regularly functioning on 4 hours of sleep and occasionally missing meals when time didn't permit a proper break. A summer internship at a local marketing firm became my first professional opportunity. Though unpaid, it offered valuable experience and professional connections. To make it financially viable, I kept my restaurant job, working evenings and weekends while interning weekdays. That summer, I lost 12 pounds I couldn't afford to lose, often too exhausted to prepare proper meals. Course selection became a strategic game beyond academic interests. I prioritized classes with professors known for assigning online readings over expensive textbooks. I selected majors based on employment prospects rather than passion, ultimately choosing business administration for its practical applications and recruitment potential. When the journalism program, my secret interest, announced an exciting new concentration, I calculated the additional semester it would require and reluctantly remained on my more direct path. Junior year brought an opportunity that highlighted the true cost of my financial situation. The university's study abroad program in London accepted my application, complete with a partial scholarship. For 3 days, I allowed myself to imagine experiencing another country, expanding my worldview beyond work and study. Then I calculated the remaining costs, even with the most austere budget, and declined the offer. That night, I cried for hours in our apartment bathroom, careful not to wake Ashley. My college experience became defined by what others took for granted. While classmates traveled during breaks, I picked up extra shifts. When peers attended networking events with polished resumes and professional attire, I wore the same 2 interview outfits repeatedly, hoping no one would notice. Holidays meant double shifts at the restaurant while other students returned to family celebrations. Despite these challenges, or perhaps because of them, I graduated with honors. My parents attended the ceremony, seeming genuinely proud as I crossed the stage in my borrowed regalia. For a moment, I allowed myself to believe they understood what I had accomplished. That illusion shattered at dinner afterward when my father casually mentioned they were helping my brother Jason with the down payment on his new truck. A discretionary expense that exceeded what even modest contributions to my education would have cost. As I accepted my diploma, I also accepted a hard truth: my achievement belonged entirely to me, both the glory and the burden of it. The entry-level position at Meridian Marketing came with a starting salary of $38,000, modest by industry standards, but a fortune compared to my college earnings. Still, the weight of $43,000 in student loans tempered any financial celebration. My first adult budget allocated 50% of my after-tax income directly to loan repayment, a percentage financial advisors would call extreme, but that felt necessary to free myself from debt's shadow. I found an apartment in a less desirable neighborhood, sharing the space with 3 roommates to keep my housing costs under $500 monthly. Emily, Jasmine, and Taylor were all recent graduates like me, though none faced student debt of my magnitude. They ordered takeout several times weekly and bought new clothes with regular frequency, normal behaviors that seemed wildly indulgent from my perspective. "You should come with us to happy hour," Emily would suggest, explaining, "it's half-price appetizers." What she saw as savings, I calculated as unnecessary spending. While they gathered their purses for evening outings, I packed my lunch for the next workday, typically a peanut butter sandwich, carrot sticks, and an apple. My colleagues at Meridian similarly indulged in daily coffee shop purchases and lunch deliveries, small luxuries that would have derailed my aggressive debt repayment plan. My financial tracking evolved from college notebook to elaborate Excel spreadsheet, categorizing every expense and projecting payoff dates based on various payment scenarios. The document became both tool and obsession, reviewed nightly with the devotion others might give to social media. 3 months into my position, I caught the attention of Nancy Garland, the firm's creative director. After I stayed late to complete a project others had abandoned before deadline, she invited me to coffee, an invitation I accepted while calculating the $4.50 expenditure against my budget. "You work differently than other recent hires," Nancy observed, stirring her latte. "More focused, less entitled. What drives you?" Her genuine interest surprised me. I hesitated before explaining my financial situation, expecting the usual dismissive response. Instead, she nodded with understanding. "I put myself through school too," she revealed. "Not many people here know that. It changes how you view everything: time, money, opportunity." Nancy became more than a supervisor. She became an advocate. When project leadership opportunities arose, she recommended me despite my junior status. When I demonstrated proficiency with data analytics skills self-taught through free online courses, she assigned me to higher visibility client accounts. 9 months into what should have been at least an 18-month junior position, she recommended me for promotion. The associated salary increase, nearly $8,000 annually, didn't change my lifestyle, but dramatically accelerated my debt repayment timeline. While colleagues expressed congratulations, several made comments revealing their assumptions about my situation. "Now you can finally move to a better apartment," or "time to treat yourself to a new wardrobe." They couldn't understand that financial freedom meant more to me than material upgrades. Developing a professional wardrobe on my budget required creative solutions. I haunted thrift stores in wealthy neighborhoods, finding designer pieces at fraction of their retail cost. I learned basic alteration techniques from YouTube videos, tailoring secondhand clothes to fit properly. What colleagues complimented as my distinctive style was necessity disguised as fashion sense. My parents' reaction to my promotion revealed how fundamentally they misunderstood my journey. When I called with the news, my mother's first response was, "Does this mean you'll finally buy a newer car? That old thing is embarrassing." Not long after, my brother Jason called with an unexpected request. Having dropped out of community college after 1 semester, he needed $3,000 to cover credit card debt accumulated through what he described as living expenses, but his social media showed was largely entertainment and restaurant meals. "You're making good money now," he argued when I hesitated. "It's not like you have kids to support." The conversation became a turning point in our relationship. For the first time, I directly addressed the family's financial double standard. How they expected nothing from him while expecting everything from me. His response, that I'd always been obsessed with proving myself, revealed how my necessary self-reliance had been reframed as a personality flaw rather than a response to their negligence. The confrontation with my mother happened a month later, during a rare visit home. When she criticized my continued frugality, something broke inside me. Years of accumulated hurt spilled out as I detailed the countless ways they had failed to support my education while finding money for my siblings' wants. Her defensive response, that I had always been independent, while my siblings needed more help, confirmed what I'd long suspected: my self-sufficiency had been used against me. I left their house that day with a clearer understanding of our relationship. Their narrative positioned my financial independence as a character trait rather than a necessity they had imposed. This realization, while painful, allowed me to stop seeking the recognition they couldn't provide. Professional advancement continued despite personal turmoil. 2 years into my career, another promotion expanded both my responsibilities and compensation. With the increased income, I accelerated my debt repayment further, making additional principal payments whenever possible. I maintained my Spartan lifestyle despite now earning a respectable salary, a choice that baffled new colleagues who hadn't witnessed my earlier struggles. The spreadsheet tracking my student loans became a source of daily motivation. Each payment reduced the principal, bringing me incrementally closer to freedom. I calculated interest saved through accelerated payment, watching the figure grow with satisfaction no luxury purchase could match. My original 10-year repayment plan shortened to 7, then 5, as I directed every windfall and bonus directly to the loan balance. 3 years and 7 months after graduation, less than half the standard repayment period, I made the final student loan payment. Sitting alone in my shared apartment, I submitted the electronic payment with hands that trembled slightly. The confirmation screen appeared anticlimactically, a simple, payment processed, message marking the conclusion of years of sacrifice. That evening, the emotional weight of what I'd accomplished finally registered. Alone in my room, I experienced my first panic attack, hyperventilating, crying uncontrollably, my body finally processing the stress it had carried for years. The debt was gone, but its shadow remained in habits so deeply ingrained they had become my identity. Who was I without the driving pressure of financial obligation? What would motivate my decisions now? The following day, I withdrew $100 from my account, an unprecedented frivolity, and purchased a bottle of champagne I'd never have considered before. Sitting on our apartment building's roof that evening, I toasted the sunset and my debt-free future, allowing myself to feel genuine pride for perhaps the first time. With student loans vanquished, my financial focus shifted immediately to the next goal, homeownership. The same discipline that had freed me from debt now directed itself toward accumulating a down payment. My revised budget maintained the same 50% savings rate, though now those funds went toward building rather than repaying. The decision to pursue homeownership at 26 struck many as premature. Friends still embracing rental flexibility questioned why I'd tie myself down. Colleagues suggested investing in the market instead. But after years of temporary housing, dorm rooms, shared apartments with rotating roommates, I craved permanence, a space that couldn't be taken away through others' decisions. My research began methodically. Evenings and weekends previously dedicated to additional work now went toward understanding mortgage types, interest rates, and housing market trends. I attended first-time homebuyer workshops, learning about inspection processes and closing costs rarely discussed in popular narratives about homeownership. Most real estate agents dismissed me immediately. At open houses, they directed their attention to older couples or individuals clearly further along in their careers. Several asked if my parents would be co-signing, their expressions showing clear skepticism when I explained I would be the sole applicant. Diane Reynolds, a real estate agent I met through a homebuyer seminar, became the exception. In her 50s with decades of experience, she took my pre-approval letter and savings plan seriously, never questioning my ability to follow through. Most people your age aren't this prepared, she noted during our first meeting. You've done the work most buyers twice your age haven't bothered with. My savings plan, while aggressive, still required at least 18 months to reach the minimum down payment amount. To accelerate the timeline, I began driving for a rideshare service on weekends, dedicating those earnings entirely to my home fund. The additional work meant sacrificing what little social life I'd managed to develop, but the goal's proximity made the trade-off acceptable. Dating during this period proved particularly challenging. Men my age typically balance entry-level salaries with active social lives, weekend trips, and regular restaurant meals. My financial priorities and work schedule confused them. Several promising relationships ended when they misinterpreted my frugality as lack of interest or my unavailability as disengagement. Jordan, a graphic designer I met through work, became the exception. After our third date was rescheduled due to my rideshare commitments, he suggested a home-cooked meal at his apartment instead of an expensive restaurant. I respect what you're working toward, he told me that evening. Most people our age are just drifting. His understanding created space for a relationship that accommodated rather than competed with my goals. He joined me for open houses, offering design perspective while I focused on structural elements and neighborhood research. His creative eye balanced my practical considerations, a partnership that respected our different strengths. When I shared my home buying plans during a family dinner, Their reactions followed familiar patterns. My father questioned whether I'd considered how much trouble homeownership is, while my mother suggested waiting until I was settled with someone. My siblings exchanged knowing glances, a silent communication suggesting my ambitions were another example of trying to prove something. You could keep renting and actually enjoy your 20s, my brother Jason suggested. No one expects you to own a house at your age. Their skepticism no longer had power to discourage me. Their expectations, or lack thereof, had become irrelevant to my decisions. If anything, their doubts strengthened my resolve to succeed without their emotional or financial support. After viewing 27 properties over 4 months, I found a promising option. A modest 2-bedroom townhouse in a stable neighborhood with good transportation access. The asking price stretched my budget, but remained within responsible limits according to my calculations. After 3 viewings and thorough research on comparable properties, I submitted an offer slightly below asking price. The negotiation process tested my resolve. The sellers countered, I responded. We reached a tentative agreement. Then the home inspection revealed concerning issues with the HVAC system and electrical wiring, repairs that would cost thousands beyond my budget. Despite emotional attachment to what I'd already begun thinking of as my home, I made the difficult decision to walk away. Many first-time buyers would ignore these issues or overextend themselves to make repairs, Diane told me afterward. Your discipline is unusual and will serve you well. The disappointment of that failed purchase coincided with a challenging market shift. Rising interest rates and increasing prices meant my carefully calculated budget now covered less than it had just months earlier. Properties I could have afforded previously now exceeded my means, a reality that tested my determination. The emotional toll of continued searching. Finding potential homes, allowing myself to imagine living there, then losing them to higher bidders or discovering deal-breaking issues, created a roller coaster of hope and disappointment. Several times I considered postponing the goal, giving the market time to stabilize. Each time, I recommitted to the search, adjusting expectations while maintaining my fundamental criteria. After 3 more months and 11 additional viewings, I found it. A small standalone house slightly further from the city center than I'd initially planned. Built in the 1960s, it lacked modern aesthetics, but offered solid construction, updated plumbing, and a recently replaced roof. The location added 15 minutes to my commute, but provided better long-term appreciation potential according to my research. The bidding process brought fresh anxiety. 2 other offers came in simultaneously, creating a situation my agent warned might lead to a bidding war. Rather than emotional escalation, I calculated my absolute maximum offer, the highest amount that would maintain my emergency fund and avoid overextension, and submitted it with a personal letter explaining my commitment to maintaining the home's character. The seller, an older woman downsizing after 40 years in the house, accepted my offer despite it being $5,000 below the highest bid. Her agent later explained that my letter had resonated with her desire to sell to someone who would care for the property rather than flip it for profit. The mortgage approval process introduced a final wave of stress. Despite excellent credit and consistent income, my age and relatively brief employment history triggered additional scrutiny. The underwriting process required multiple documentation rounds, each information request triggering fresh anxiety about potential rejection. The closing date arrived with nervous anticipation. Sitting alone at a table with the seller, agents, and attorney, I signed document after document until my hand cramped. When the attorney finally slid the keys across the table, the magnitude of the moment struck me. At 27, I had accomplished what many Americans never achieve, and had done so entirely through my own efforts. Walking through the empty rooms of my house that evening, I felt a complex mix of emotions. Pride in what I'd accomplished, lingering hurt over the support I'd never received, and quiet amazement at standing in a space that belonged, truly and legally, to me alone. 2 weeks after moving in, I hosted a small housewarming gathering, my first real celebration in years. Jordan helped arrange furniture and hang pictures, transforming the empty space into something resembling a home. A few close colleagues, friends from my apartment building, and Diane the real estate agent joined us for an evening that felt surreal in its normalcy. Against my better judgment, I had invited my family, hoping the milestone might bridge our emotional distance. They arrived as a unit, my parents eyeing the modest property with expressions I couldn't quite read. The evening progressed pleasantly enough until my mother's seemingly innocent question, "So what's this neighborhood like? Is it safe?" Her emphasis carried clear implications about the area's socioeconomic status. "It's perfectly safe, Mom," I responded. I researched crime statistics extensively before buying. My father wandered through the living room, pointing out minor imperfections, a scuff on the baseboard, slight unevenness in the kitchen floor. "Hope you had a good inspector," he commented. Houses this age can hide a lot of problems. Their subtle undermining continued throughout the evening. When friends expressed admiration for what I'd accomplished, my mother interjected with comments like, "Mackenzie has always been determined to do things her way," transforming compliments into commentary on perceived stubbornness. When conversation turned to future renovation plans, my father questioned whether I'd bitten off more than I can chew. The breaking point came during a toast Jordan offered, praising my years of hard work and sacrifice. As glasses raised, my mother added, "Well, Mackenzie always did insist on being independent. We would have helped if she'd ever asked." The room fell uncomfortably silent. Years of accumulated hurt, the double standards, the dismissal of my achievements, the rewriting of their neglect as my choice, crystallized in that moment. With unexpected calmness, I placed my glass on the kitchen counter. "I did ask," I said quietly. "I asked for help with SAT prep costs. I asked for assistance with application fees. I showed you scholarship forms that needed parent information. Each time, you had reasons why you couldn't help, reasons that never seemed to apply when Jason or Amber needed something." My father's face reddened. "That's unfair. We've always treated you kids equally." "Equally?" I laughed without humor. "You helped Jason with a truck down payment after he dropped out of college, while I worked 30 hours weekly to avoid more student loans. You paid for Amber's dance lessons while telling me there was no money for my education. What exactly was equal about that?" My mother's expression hardened into familiar defensiveness. "You've always been different from your siblings, more capable, more independent. They needed our support more." "I wasn't independent by choice," I countered, my voice steady despite my racing heart. "I was independent because you made it clear from childhood that I couldn't count on you. You turned my self-reliance, which I developed out of necessity, into an excuse to withhold support you freely gave my siblings." The conversation escalated into the confrontation we'd avoided for years. My mother's jealousy of my achievements became painfully apparent as she accused me of always thinking I was better than the family. My father, uncomfortable with direct emotional conflict, attempted to minimize decades of disparity as simple misunderstandings. "I never wanted to be better than anyone," I explained, tears finally breaking through my composed exterior. "I just wanted the same support you gave them. But you decided early on that I didn't need it, that my strength was somehow a reason to withhold rather than nurture." My father, in a rare moment of vulnerability, admitted what I'd long suspected. "Your drive intimidated me," he confessed quietly. "You reminded me of all the things I wanted to accomplish but never did. It was easier to focus on your siblings, their needs were simpler, more straightforward." My sister Amber's eyes widened at this admission, while Jason looked away uncomfortably. They had been passive beneficiaries of our parents' uneven support, never questioning the disparity because it advantaged them. "I'm proud of what you've accomplished," my father added. "But seeing it highlights my own failures." The honesty came decades too late. Whatever healing might have been possible had eroded through years of neglect and rationalization. We had become strangers, connected by biology, but separated by fundamentally different realities. "I think it's time for you to go," I said finally. "This is my home, something I created without your help. I get to decide who belongs in it." Walking my family to their cars, I recognized this might be the last time we attempted meaningful connection. My mother hugged me stiffly, whispering, "You've always been so harsh in your judgments." My father shook my hand formally, as though sealing a business transaction rather than acknowledging a family fracture. After they drove away, I returned to find my remaining guests had tactfully moved to the backyard, giving me space to process the confrontation. Alone in my kitchen, surrounded by half-empty glasses and abandoned plates, the emotional dam finally broke completely. Years of suppressed hurt poured out in heaving sobs that bent me double against the counter. Jordan found me there minutes later, offering silent support rather than hollow reassurances. As my breathing steadied, friends drifted back inside, creating a protective circle of genuine connection. These people, who had witnessed my journey, respected my choices, and celebrated my achievements without qualification, had become my true family. "Family isn't always who you're born to," said Emma, my former neighbor who had attended despite moving across town. "Sometimes it's who sees your worth without you having to prove it constantly." In the weeks that followed, I established clear boundaries with my biological family. Our communication became limited and formal, holiday gatherings replaced with occasional text messages. The distance brought not sadness, but relief, freedom from seeking approval that would never fully materialize. I began therapy sessions with Dr. Melissa Rogers, working through the complex grief of family estrangement and the financial trauma that had shaped my relationship with money. Our sessions revealed how deeply financial insecurity had affected my identity, creating patterns of hypervigilance and self-denial that persisted despite my objective success. Financial trauma manifests differently than other forms, Dr. Rogers explained during our third session. Society often doesn't recognize it as valid trauma, which makes healing more complicated. Through therapy, I began examining which aspects of my financial discipline served me well and which represented maladaptive responses to childhood insecurity. Learning to enjoy modest comforts without guilt became a significant challenge, one I addressed with the same determination previously directed toward financial goals. For months after the confrontation, I received an unexpected visit from Linda, my former manager at Wilson's Market. Now retired, she had heard about my homeownership through mutual connections and brought a houseplant as a gift. "I always knew you'd succeed," she told me as we sat on my small front porch. "Not everyone recognized what you were capable of, but I saw it from your first day in that too-big uniform." Her pride, unconditional and untainted by jealousy or regret, provided healing my parents' qualified acknowledgement never could. In her sincere admiration, I found validation that my journey, though more difficult than it should have been, had forged strength and resilience worth celebrating. 1 year after receiving my house keys, I celebrated my homeownership anniversary with a quiet evening on my newly built deck. The property had evolved alongside my personal growth, walls painted in colors I chose, garden beds beginning to flourish, and small improvements completed with my own hands. Like me, the house was transforming gradually, becoming more authentic with each intentional change. My relationship with money had evolved significantly during that year. While financial discipline remained important, I had learned to distinguish between scarcity thinking and responsible management. Small indulgences, fresh flowers for the kitchen table, occasional dinners out with Jordan, a weekend trip to visit friends no longer triggered guilt or anxiety. The spreadsheets remained, but their purpose shifted from survival tool to planning instrument. Therapy with Dr. Rogers continued monthly, providing space to untangle complex emotions around family, achievement, and self-worth. Our sessions often returned to a central question: who was I beyond financial accomplishment? What values would guide my decisions when immediate survival no longer dominated my thinking? The answer emerged gradually through a financial education blog I started 6 months after moving in. What began as personal reflection became a platform for sharing practical knowledge with others navigating similar circumstances. Weekly posts about student loan management, first-time home buying, and emotional relationships with money attracted readers who recognized their struggles in my experiences. "Your post about financial gaslighting helped me understand my childhood," one reader commented. I always thought I was bad with money because that's what my parents said when they couldn't/wouldn't help with college. The blog became more than a creative outlet. It transformed my painful experiences into resources for others. This alchemy of turning hardship into community support provided meaning beyond personal achievement. For someone who had accomplished goals largely alone, the connection with readers filled an emotional void I hadn't fully acknowledged. My professional trajectory continued upward with a promotion to senior marketing strategist. The position brought increased responsibility and compensation, but my approach to the opportunity differed from previous advancements. Rather than channeling all additional income toward the next financial goal, I created a more balanced allocation, retirement savings, home improvement fund, and notably, a joy category for experiences that enriched life beyond balance sheets. Jordan and I continued building our relationship, navigating the complexity of my financial independence within partnership. His creative perspective balanced my practical approach, while his emotional openness helped me recognize where financial trauma still influenced my decisions. When he proposed moving in together after 18 months of dating, the conversation centered on partnership rather than financial advantage, a significant evolution in my approach to relationships. My connections with biological family remained limited, but shifted toward cautious reconciliation on new terms. Quarterly dinners with clear time boundaries replaced the previous pattern of sporadic, tension-filled visits. My parents gradually accepted that our relationship would never include the unqualified closeness they shared with my siblings, but could still hold measured care within appropriate boundaries. "I'm trying to understand your perspective," my mother said during one carefully orchestrated coffee meeting. "I can't change the past, but I'm listening now." These words, however limited, represented more acknowledgement than she had previously offered. Our relationship would never fully heal, but the bleeding wound had begun to scar over, sensitive but no longer actively painful. The most meaningful developments came through mentoring opportunities that emerged organically. Through my blog, I connected with several young women from backgrounds similar to mine, academically capable but lacking family financial support. Monthly meetings at my kitchen table became informal financial literacy workshops where we discussed scholarship applications, budget strategies, and navigating systems designed for students with parental assistance. Samantha, a particularly dedicated high school senior, reminded me poignantly of my younger self. Her determination to attend college despite parents who alternated between disinterest and active discouragement resonated deeply with my experience. When she received her first acceptance letter with partial scholarship, celebrating in my living room because she couldn't share the news at home, I recognized how supporting others had become central to my healing process. My volunteer work expanded to include financial literacy workshops at the local high school. Teaching teenagers basic concepts like compound interest, credit management, and scholarship searching, information I had discovered alone through painful trial and error, brought satisfaction beyond personal achievement. Each student who took notes earnestly or asked thoughtful questions represented potential hardship prevented through knowledge shared. "You make this stuff make sense," one junior told me after class. "My parents never talk about money except to say there isn't enough." I didn't know there were actual strategies I could use. As my second year of homeownership approached, I began considering longer-term financial goals. The discipline that had carried me through debt repayment and home buying remained valuable, but now operated from abundance rather than scarcity. My emergency fund had grown beyond immediate survival needs, retirement contributions increased steadily, and my home's value had appreciated modestly but significantly. This stability allowed contemplation of previously unimaginable possibilities. Could I establish a small scholarship fund for students like me? Might sabbatical travel become feasible in coming years? Was there potential to expand my blog into more formal financial education resources? Questions that once seemed irrelevantly luxurious now represented authentic possibilities. My relationship with my siblings evolved into something more balanced as they faced adult challenges without the parental safety net they had grown accustomed to. When my brother Jason lost his job and approached me for guidance rather than money, Our conversation marked a shift toward mutual respect rather than resentment. My sister Amber, preparing for college herself, began asking questions about scholarships and financial aid, topics our parents remained ill-equipped to address. "I always thought you were just being difficult by doing everything yourself," Amber admitted during one of our conversations. "Now I realize you were showing me it could be done." Profound healing came through recognizing that working since 16 hadn't just been about financial necessity. It had built character, resilience, and capabilities many peers lacked. The independence that had sometimes felt like punishment had become my greatest strength. While I wouldn't choose the same path for others, I could acknowledge how adversity had forged qualities I now valued in myself. The most significant internal shift came through forgiving myself for past social sacrifices. The parties missed, relationships unformed, and experiences delayed had seemed like failures during my struggle years. Now I recognize them as necessary trade-offs made by someone doing her best with limited resources. This self-forgiveness allowed me to release lingering shame about the normal, young adulthood I hadn't experienced. My home became more than physical shelter. It represented security I had created for myself when none was offered. Each mortgage payment built equity not just financially but emotionally, creating stability that couldn't be withdrawn by others' decisions or limitations. The modest house with its imperfect rooms and gradually improving features embodied resilience made tangible. Jordan moved in as we approached our second anniversary, bringing his design sensibility and warmth to spaces still evolving. Our shared home became a gathering place for friends, men's, and chosen family, people connected by mutual support rather than obligation. These gatherings, filled with genuine celebration and belonging, healed wounds created by years of conditional family acceptance. Working since 16, never asking for a dime, and paying off my own education had indeed been a difficult path. The first home I purchased represented not just financial achievement, but emotional emancipation, freedom to define success, family, and home on my own terms. The journey continued, but now from foundation of security I had built myself, brick by determined brick. If you've made it to the end of my story, I'd love to know if any part of it resonated with your own experiences. Have you had to be financially independent from a young age? Did you also struggle with family who didn't understand your journey? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If this story helped you feel less alone in your financial struggles, please subscribe to hear more authentic conversations about money and independence. And remember, the path you're carving might be harder, but the strength you're building belongs entirely to you. Thank you for listening, and I wish you success in whatever mountain you're currently climbing.